This is my Amocan PC, and I'd like to think that what sets it apart from most other Amocan PCs is that it is considerably smaller, while also looking good. Before I even started to build this thing, I had to make sure that a computer would fit inside. And that gets back to the size of this case. This case is only 7.5 inches tall, which, if you know anything about computer parts, the smallest motherboard that, is kind of popular is the Mini ITX. And that is 7.5 inches. So what I had to do was cut the bottom of the case to allow the motherboard to protrude slightly. It wasn't by much, but it had to happen that way. Otherwise it just wouldn't fit. Or if I tried to close the lid, it would end up putting pressure on the motherboard. So anyway, measurements are an important thing. If you do a project like this, make sure you measure everything and make sure that where you're putting it works out. So, without further ado, I will show you the can. On the back side, you can see the ins and outs. I had to hand file each of these ports, and it didn't end up being quite as perfect as I would have liked. There's some gaps and misalignment here and there, but it ended up being okay. But that was something I didn't take into account, and it kind of messed up the graphics card placement. So again, if you do something like this, make sure you take all of that into consideration. Another thing I wanted to do with this can was make it so that the entire PC was separate from all of the other parts, so that this lid could basically swing free of the whole thing. That was just my own design consideration. Other people might have a different idea. It's just aesthetics for me. But anyway, that's also why I included the power button on the latch itself. We'll make sure this is in frame. Whoops. So that's the power button. It is entirely free from the chassis. So if I wanted to turn the computer on without this, I could take the lid off and just use that button there. Yeah, so I mean, if I really wanted to, I could lock this lid down and use it in the build, like for airflow and stuff, which wouldn't be a bad idea. I would encourage other people to, incorporate more airflow into their designs than I did in mine. The only source of air is this fan here. And I mean, it seems to be doing fine, but more is always better in terms of cooling. So if you can, I would encourage incorporating more fans. There are ways to do it. Other than, using the top, I could have put a fan on the bottom, but that would have involved having to relocate or exclude the front USB. And I really wanted front USB because it's kind of more of a home theater PC. Anyway, so that's where that stands. So this lid is removable. It's kind of cool that way. I like it with the lid on because obviously it kind of brings the whole thing together. So like I explained in my previous video, as I was designing this and building it, I wanted the motherboard to be visible from the window. And this involved having to make my own standoffs. And looking back, I would probably say to avoid doing this because trying to align these standoffs to the holes on the motherboard blind is really difficult. Unless you have a really solid, reliable way of locating where these standoffs will go and how far in they have to go, I would avoid doing that and just make a template of the board holes itself and put it, right up against the plate. Because what ended up happening for me is the top of the board ended up being farther out than the bottom of the board. So the bottom standoffs go basically right up against the board. But in this one, at the top and the one at the back, you can see there's a gap. So I had to secure these standoffs about 1/8 of an inch up from the top of the casing here. So again, not ideal. This also brings into question whether or not the board is, secured from flexing. You can see how it's laid out. These power supplies here, the graphics card, the motherboard, and the fan, and all of the cords are kind of just bunched up over here. Originally, when I had the idea to put the window in, I measured out 2.5 inches on this side, maybe just a bit more, like 2.25 or 2 3/4 inches, to hide the drives, the SSD and the hard drive. That ended up being not enough, and I think I could have just done an entire full face window, which would have looked a little bit better in my opinion. This window kind of fits exactly how large the motherboard or the kind of the board space is. The graphics card extends right to the end of the window. But originally I wanted this bullet casing to be visible from the window, and this is the power supply going to the board. You'll see that in my original video. I wanted that visible through the window, but it didn't end up working because the power supply cord has to bend around the board and back to the power supply, and it kind of puts the bullet right where you can't see it. It was kind of unavoidable at this point. Also, let's see, what else was I gonna say? Yeah, the cords. I had a few comments from people saying, all the cables are way too long. You should have bought modded cables that are shorter. And this goes back to my budget thing. That would have added cost to the whole project, and I didn't want to do that. So I sleeved it all myself. It was basically free, other than the time I spent, which was a good few hours. But I don't have a crimper or anything, so I can't cut wires to size. I have to use what's given to me. So basically I was stuck with the full length of the cables, and I had to sleeve them that way. So yes, I understand I could have done that, but it would have added cost, and I wanted to keep the cost as low as possible. So there, stop telling me the cables need to be shorter. I know this. There's not much I can do about it. I'm trying to install a BIOS that will allow me to overclock this processor from 3.2 gigahertz to about 4 gigahertz. But anyway, I thought all of the motherboard and processor things were going to be fine so that I could overclock it. Not the case. So do your own research and make sure that they are compatible. It might happen, it might not. I don't know. Really, at this point, I'm not too worried about not overclocking it because I'm not going to be putting that much workload on the processor or the RAM or the graphics card. But the option to do it would be nice. So, anyway. Yeah, I'm guessing there are going to be a lot of questions about, how did I do this? And can you show a process for doing this and this? And to that, I would say most of this for me was trial and error, but I have experience in machining, so for me, at least, it is kind of easy to do certain things like that, like measuring, how much space you need for certain things, and tolerances, and making sure things fit and aren't interfering with other things. But to some other people, it might be rather difficult. And to them, I say, if you are, contemplating doing a build like this and you don't have experience in certain things, like, hand filing or machining to some extent. Not that you need full, CNC machines or anything, but, just, locating holes and drilling them, and how to ensure that the holes you're drilling are exactly where you need them. If you can't figure that out, I would not recommend doing a project like this, because I think you would just be frustrated, and, you might potentially screw something up. So that's my answer to those kind of questions. I'm not really going to go into detail about answering any of them. Performance-wise, I guess I could just show you it booting up and, streaming games and movies and stuff. So, yeah, you've seen it. That's the inside. The hard drive is crammed in at the bottom there. You can kind of see it. It's underneath all of the other cables, and then of course the SSD is right there. I did not really plan any cable management into this, which would have been a good idea. I hear you all. It would have been a great idea to incorporate cable management, but it's rather difficult when you have sleeved cables and they're rather large and the space is so confined. So originally I was planning on selling this thing, but I think these issues that I kind of have to monitor to ensure that the computer won't, explode, makes me tentative to sell this. So I think I'm just going to keep it and maybe sell cases in the future. Okay, so here it is in the location that I kind of assigned to it for my workstation / battle station. And there are only 4 connections that I have to make. Of course, the power connection is self-explanatory. The video card, I'm just using a VGA cable. I have it hooked up to an audio receiver with a 5.1 surround sound system. Optical audio is awesome. So, all the connections are made. Let's boot it up. Another thing is the stock cooler on the CPU is kind of loud from Intel. They don't make very quiet coolers or heat sinks, but come on. Because of this board, ASRock provides some tuning utilities, and I can set the fan speeds. So on boot up and idle, this thing runs very quietly because I have the fan curve set pretty low. But I also have the main fan set so that it's circulating a lot of air. So there you have it. It's booted up. It's basically a backup to my regular computer, my mid-tower PC. But for Netflix, it's perfect. I mounted the TV on the wall so that I can enjoy it from my messy bed. And that's it. That's the whole idea behind this computer. It functions just fine. I have the Logitech wireless stuff unified through this dongle, which is awesome. It makes it so much easier to navigate Netflix and whatnot wirelessly and without an optical mouse. Trying to use an optical mouse on a bed is kind of a nightmare. So there, I think I went into fairly good detail. I don't know. It's about all I have to say about it, really. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.